It's Brian Preston, the money guy.
But there are some side effects to rebalancing. It can be expensive, and there's several things. It can create more taxes. It can create transaction costs. And there's also the time and labor of doing a rebalance. And then I thought it was interesting is that a lot of research has come out. I want to kind of talk about that. Let's talk about it before we get into the nuts and bolts details. What is Vanguard? Because they did a whole research study. What does Vanguard say rebalancing adds to the portfolio?
Yeah, so Vanguard did a really interesting study. Now the study was a lot broader than rebalancing, and this is back in around 2012. They've done a bunch of studies since then to update this, but the one that we really loved was back in 2012, and they were trying to quantify how much value working with an advisor could potentially add to your portfolio. So they had a bunch of different metrics that they used to measure that. Well, one of the metrics that they use to quantify how an advisor can help is the value added to your portfolio from systematic or strategic rebalancing. And according to Vanguard, they equated a solid rebalancing strategy to potentially adding up to 0.35%, so almost 1/3 of 1% per year, to your total investment performance over the long term, right? So that's
long term that could add up.
Pretty substantial. I thought that was interesting. If you factor in asset location, which we'll talk about in a second, because in our opinion, you can't have rebalancing without asset location, that it actually pushes that an increased value up to over 1% per year, just from those two mechanisms of managing your portfolio well.
And those are just more tools in your bat belt of making sure you're maximizing what's going on with the investments. So one of the things I talked about in show prep, Bo, is I said, well, what's the industry standard?
Sure.
I mean, what is the industry standard? I mean, is there something out there?
Yeah, what's so interesting is you actually asked me that question. Hey, Bo, what's the industry standard? And I kind of looked around. I'm like, well, I know how we do it, and I know our philosophy, but what is the standard? Because the game has changed a little bit. There are now robo-advisors. There are now algorithms. There's quant trading that takes place. So I went and kind of asked Google, what's the standard? Because Google knows everything. Let's just agree on that. What's the standard for rebalancing? And this is what I found. There is no standard anymore. If you ask 100 different people about what the appropriate way to rebalance is, you're likely to get 100 different answers, which makes it really, really complicated to figure out what makes the most sense for you.
Yeah, and that's where I think we can hopefully be that common sense that comes into it. So let's go ahead and bring in this article.
Sure.
Because I wanted to bring up what makes this article, because it is in the section called Innovations in Finance. What makes this innovative? And the thing that I thought is that traditional rebalancing is exactly what we'd already talked about, is that if you had a 60-40, time goes by, just say it's a quarter, whether it's a year, but just a certain period of time goes by, the portfolio, because of stocks going up or stocks going down, but the allocation gets out of wonk.
Sure.
Gets cattywampus.
Gets what?
Let's just keep moving, because I probably said that all wrong. You make me all insecure when I mispronounce things.
Well, I've never heard the word cattywampus. I'm assuming you pronounced it well.
Is cattywampus? I mean, that's out of balance. We are doing a show on rebalancing, so a word like cattywampus seems like it would be very, even the sound of it sounds out of balance. So the fact is, it needs to be adjusted. So traditionally, you would just, from a standpoint of time, time would be your indicator. You would rebalance.
Sure.
Well, the article that was in the Wall Street Journal said that you're not going to base it off of time. We're going to base it off of wants. Okay. What are the wants of the person that is has the goal of rebalancing?
Sure.
And here's what I thought was very interesting about this. It took something that's very time-based as an analytical concept. If you make it wants-based, that's very behavioral.
Sure.
It completely puts it on its ear in the fact that instead of thinking about it from an analytical standpoint, it's now becoming goals-based of what do you want to have happen behaviorally. Yep. And that way, because here's what was, and this is because, and I don't mean to get you in trouble, because we know.
We're live here. If you say something to get me in trouble, that's not going to be good.
You weren't impressed with that article.
I'm sorry. It was not my favorite.
And I don't mean to put you on the spot, but here's what I do like about it. I'm always looking for, when I'm thinking about any financial concept, I'm trying to think about how is this useful and helping me educate somebody or to make somebody more successful. And when you tell me something is behavioral based, because what is the biggest limitation with the average investor? It is definitely behavioral.
100%.
It's easy to tell somebody just go buy the S&P 500. And if you do it, historically, you'd be great. But we know that there's this little thing in the background that causes all kind of problems, and it's called human nature.
Sure.
Human nature is greedy, but human nature is also very fearful. So people I think it connects with them when you think about the behavioral side of it. So when this article was written, there's two components of the goals base. There's two things. He breaks it down to very simplified things.
And I think what I like about this, right? So while I didn't love the whole article, I do like that. I think it allows you to have this overlay that allows you to stick with it. Because really, when you think about rebalancing, just purely academically, there are three distinct benefits that you most often cite for why you rebalance.
Okay.
The first is it naturally creates a mechanism where you buy low, sell high.
That's true.
Right? That's kind of the first piece of
true.
it. You know, if you're just rebalancing, you sell the things that have done well, you buy the things that have not done well. That's how you get back
It's
to
a
rebalance.
self-correcting
It's
pruning
self-corrects. That's right.
of your portfolio.
The second thing, and this is where I think the article was brilliant, is that generally speaking, rebalancing allows you to keep your allocation where it should be, meaning it allows you to keep your risk in check.
Yeah.
If you're supposed to be a 60-40, then getting back to a 60-40 keeps it in check. This actually this defines risk a different way, in more of a behavioral way, which I think was beautiful. And then the third thing that he doesn't touch on as much that we'll end with is it does allow you to tax manage your portfolio. We'll talk about that with asset location. So academically, those are the three things that rebalancing does. This is a very different intellectual approach to how you should think about that. And what I like about this one is this one makes it make more sense in the real world.
Well, I think it creates that bridge. I'm always looking for ways to connect with people who maybe don't traditionally understand personal finance, or they think they want to go a different way. And we've had a prospect. I'll go ahead and say this. We had a prospect who came to us that had a multiple seven-figure portfolio. Well, not even an old. He was my age, so I don't consider him old. You might consider him older, but and the portfolio was 100% in cash. And the reason it was 100% in cash is that, and now realize from a vocational standpoint, this gentleman made a lot of money.
Sure.
So that seven-figure portfolio was strictly on 100% of his behavior of saving money, but he was not going to invest outside of cash.
Right.
And he never became a client because I never could convince him that he ought to go move away from his aversion to this risk.
Sure.
So when I read this piece where it talked about the behavioral side of it, it really kind of connected.